Hey everyone! So at this point, you should have done your special effects for the Space Cats. Now it's time to actually start finessing the design. And by this, I mean we're going to um, start really working on the other text, the layers, getting our selections for our images, working with colors. Okay, so. Let's see. When we left off last, this is where I am. So I did my special effects for the Space Cats, and this is looking pretty rough still. There's not, it's really hard to read a lot of the text and such. And so, well, before I go into what I went through and did, let's look at the final. It's going to be quite different, okay? All right. So this is what I ended up with. So there was a whole lot of issues going on with what was going on over here. So the biggest issue and what really helped me along was my background, and everyone's is going to be different. So I'm not going to take you step by step on every little thing I did, but I am going to explain some of the different considerations I took in making these decisions. So the background, even though I absolutely love this image, it wasn't working for the design, and that's the most important thing. You can love a photo, but if it's not working, it's not working. So what I ended up doing was I went back and I found, and there's that old image. I can actually get rid of that. Some other space type of images. Now, let's see. Now, when I brought it in, it wasn't actually big enough to cover the entire area. I didn't have enough resolution, so I did have to make another layer of it and then do a subtle fade, usually using a gradient on the layer mask to create this whole overall look. So yeah, that worked out pretty nice, and I didn't stay that way. As I was designing, I ended up taking some of these larger elements out because they were clashing with the text. So you can see like here and here, some of this stuff just wasn't working. And so using the clone stamp tool, I cloned different areas of the image over, and I actually, cloned one of these little things up here because I did like how that was looking. Now, let's see, what am I missing? Oh, my cat. One of the other big issues was that the cat, this was a great idea, but this rocket was taking us off the page, and I wanted to make sure it was coming onto the page. You don't ever want any part of your design to take your viewer away from it. You want it to come back in. So I just flipped it. Okay, so if we look back at this one, I flipped it around, and now the rocket, we come around, we look at this information, we look at the cat, but the rocket brings us back into the image instead of taking us out. Now, you could see that I also moved the text. So originally I had the cat centered and it was working out okay, but it was all kind of clashing, and I was making the cat smaller. It just didn't work out. And once I realized that I needed to flip it and pull it coming back in, it made more sense to have the cat on the side and move all the text and align it over here to the left instead. And from there, when you're at this point, I know it can feel really overwhelming, okay? It can feel overwhelming, like there's so much that needs to be done. I don't know where to go, and it's just best to take it one piece at a time. So like I said, I went back to my background, found a better piece for that, started messing around and playing with the fonts because this font wasn't working. This other font was from the original tutorial, and that I downloaded, and I didn't feel like it was really like, I was looking for like the space 80s look, but this just felt a little too retro. So I ended up finding a whole nother font. This one's actually called Space Think, that worked out well. And you could see that I repeated it here and then over here. Now for this font, I found one that I really liked, but it's very specialized. And when I tried using it for this other stuff, it was just competing. It was too much. So I found a sans serif font that's very straightforward, similar, but without all the extra little, dilly-dallies. But similar enough so it doesn't feel like it's a whole nother font competing for attention. And I still used my guides. So, you know, when I turn on my guides here, you could see that I'm still using all these guides right here. I started to, you know, play with this, looking at this text all as one big element in comparison to the cat. And working with my spacing. So I'm trying to get the spacing here and then between here about right. And now that I'm looking at it, I actually think I need to move it up just a tad. So you'll also notice that I went in here and just pull myself over here. I put everything into folders, and if you don't remember how to do this, you select all of the layers you want in a folder and hold down shift and then click on this little folder icon, and it'll put all those layers in a folder. It makes it a lot easier once you get, like, you know, the spacing that you want on one part to move everything together. So right now I've got you know, this info text, so I have a big a folder with all the text, another subfolder with the info text, which is this stuff here. Then I have separate folders for each of these sections because I was working on them in sections. But now that I need to move all of this, I can go ahead and click here and make sure I'm in my move tool and pull it up just a bit. And I'm looking at the spacing between here and here to kind of give it an even spacing, and then the spacing from here to here to give it an even spacing there as well. Yeah, and so little things, you know, it's the little details that really start pulling stuff like this together. So for example, the text just being white, it looked okay, but it was starting to look, it looked a little too stark. So I wanted to bring some kind of element, textural something in here. I tried a couple different things and it just wasn't working. And what I ended up doing, I actually took the background image and basically used the negative version of that by going to curves and going to color negative. It just basically reverses everything. All the blacks become whites and so forth. And then use that as the textural stuff here. And again, I had to move stuff around with the clone stamp tool. There were some things like these little galaxies that were just a little too distracting, and so just moving that stuff around. Now I think where you might have the most issues will probably be because we're all using cats, right? They're furry, they have hair. And so making a selection can be a little tricky. That's probably what I spent the most time on, was making the selection of the cat. So let's go back real quick. And so on this one, you know, I had this initial selection that I made, and it worked out pretty good, but there was some issues. So if I get in close, you can see that a lot of the hair is gone. And so I actually had to go in and use, you know, try different types of selection methods. And this is where learning all these different tools starts to come in handy, because yes, I can come over here and, you know, there's a bunch of, you know, object, quick, magic wand, just all these different selection tools. There's lasso tools, but it's a combination of these things. So you know, and what's going to work for me might not work for you. So you do have to sit here and experiment a bit with what is going to work. I believe, let me go ahead and delete this layer mask. So what did I end up doing? Let's turn off all of this other stuff. And turn off all this. Okay, what I ended up doing was coming up here to color range, select, and here in the select menu there's all kinds of different ways to select stuff. So you can select subject, you can do the color range, and by clicking on here it helped me start getting some kind of selection. And I clicked on the background, and then I'm holding down shift to add more colors to this selection of where I'm trying to go with this. Okay, We're getting a better selection. Now right now, keep in mind that I'm actually selecting the background. So I'm going to have to invert the selection to make sure that the cat is actually what's selected. So this is actually going a little bit easier than the first time I went. Let's see. All right. Okay. So I'm going to hit OK. And now I have this selection and I can come in here to select and mask. Now, I want to, I ended up changing my background when I was working on this point. So I wanted to view it on black because my background was darker. And at this point I can come over here and let's see, come down here to invert. All right, and so we're seeing now we have the cat actually selected instead of the background. So here is where all of these settings kind of start to come in handy. So I click on Smart Radius, which starts to help. And I'm taking this up and kind of just looking at those edges, and it's looking pretty good. We do have this color fringing. The background is that really crazy teal color. So I'm going to shift the edge in, and that just brings the selection a little bit more. Now we have all this hair. There is this refined hair here. I found that it wasn't working well for me, but you can try it on yours. It might work out well, and you see that it doesn't create, it's not creating the best selection. So I'm going to hit Command, or if you're on a Windows, Control Z. And instead, I'm going to use this tool right here, which is, I always forget what it's actually called. I think it's Refine Edge tool. And with this, you can go along the edge and it tries to pick up those little hairs. So now my cursor is a little bigger. I had to change it for this because it was really messing with it. And so it starts to try to pick up the edges here a little bit more. Okay, and so I'm doing this really quick right now, but when I was working on this, I took a lot of time on this. I got in close and really, went along these edges and tried to, get the best selection possible. Now let's go ahead. I'm not going to do the whole thing for you right now, but you get kind of the idea, right? So I'm going to go New Layer with Layer Mask and click OK. All right, and so we're looking pretty good. I'm just going to focus on this area because that's where I did the Refine Edge at. And you can see the difference over here. It looks a lot more choppy, right? But up here, it's starting to look a little better. Now, here's a really cool trick that is going to be super helpful with this type of stuff. So I'm going to actually hit Command, or if you're on a PC, Control, and click on the Layer Mask. That's going to create a selection of the layer mask. Now I can come over here to the actual image, and what I'm going to do is I am going to use my brush tool at a very low opacity to paint on these edges to get rid of this background cyan stuff that was going on. Okay, you can see it all throughout there. So I'm going to bring up I for eyedropper. I'm going to click I, and I'm going to select one of these colors right over here, and then I'm going to click B for my brush tool. Smaller, 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 smaller. And I'm going to take down my flow. So flow means like it's coming in kind of like opacity, but it's just coming in lighter. And I want to go really low because I don't want, if I just went ahead and did that, like that doesn't look good. Okay. Command Z, or on your PC, Control Z. So I'm going to take my flow down significantly, around 10%. And I'm just going to barely paint on these edges over here, taking my time. And if you get to a darker area, that means that you probably need to switch the colors. But yeah, it starts to kind of fill in this stuff so that it doesn't look as, you don't have that crazy cyan type of fringe anymore. And like I said, this is going to take a long time, okay? It's a furry animal. What can you do? But you can already tell that right there, this area that I did is already looking a lot better than this area right here. This is a great tip to use whenever you're compositing and you're getting any kind of fringing going on. Okay, what else can I tell you guys? I used all kinds of stuff that we went over this semester. For example, on the space rocket, it was looking pretty good, but it was a little pixelated, so I ended up adding a little bit of a blur, and then I used what do you call it? Motion blur, because it's moving, right? So I had a little bit of motion blur to help that out. Another thing was this bottom area was very empty feeling. So this is where those smoke brushes came in. I downloaded a pack of smoke brushes and using the same blue that I used up here. So I was able to add the smoke in the background. Now, if you remember from earlier, I had actually chosen different colors for this. But once I did my main text up here, the Space Cats, I really liked those colors that that they used for the tutorial. So I decided to switch my color scheme to that. It's okay. It happens. Okay. So you can see that I used that blue and repeated it down here for that smoke. For the cat, I was playing with leaving it natural or not. What I ended up doing was using a gradient map. So let's see, let's find Kitty and Rocket. There we go. So for that, I used a gradient map. All you have to do for this is that you click on here. I came down here to the adjustment layers and went to gradient map. And I was able to create a gradient to kind of, I played with it. I started actually with this gradient up here and it was just really funky looking. I had to step back and think, what colors do I want? I want to use more of these, this bright magenta and light pink for it instead. And so played with it for quite a while until I got something I was happy with. And once you get that, remember, clipping masks are gonna be your friend. So let's go ahead and delete this one. Okay. Clipping masks are your friend. So for the gradient, I only wanted it to be on the cat. So to do, just a reminder, to do a clipping mask, right click, and right now it says release clipping mask. So if I let it go, you'll see that it's now hitting everything. But if I right click and come to create clipping mask, it's going to clip to whatever layer is right underneath it. So that's important to know. I did the same technique when I added these, the white starry things to all this text. That's actually one of the reasons I ended up putting all of these layers into, all these folders into a big folder, was so I can do a clipping mask just to this entire folder. And just so it's hitting all of this stuff right here. Okay, what else? Now there was a lot of oranges, these little orange stars and galaxies or whatever they are back here. So I felt like, that was another thing that was missing. The cat was, let's see, let's turn that off for a second. Now this looks okay, but it was looking kind of stark. So I decided to go with the same type of feel that this glow on the text was having, by adding an outer glow with the layer effects. So layer effects, outer glow, and chose an orange. And how I chose this orange was just by coming over here and clicking straight on here. This is part of like what we mean when we talk about repetition, is using same colors, fonts, elements to really bring the design together. You don't have to go crazy and use every single color in the rainbow. You can keep it, keep it simple. Keep to what your main color scheme is. Okay, so let's see. What else can I tell you guys about this? Again, it took just a lot of time. And that's okay. That's what being a designer is about. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about is that if you remember, I did, I brought in these guides, and for me personally, I have a hard time seeing, I'm seeing the whole thing, and I know that this 1/4 inch bleed, it's actually, I set this wrong. It's set to a 1/2 inch up here. So 1/4 inch is really right there. I take it I'm seeing the overall design, so I'm having a hard time with making sure that it's all gonna look okay. So one thing you can do to test it out is go ahead and do a quick crop. So let's go ahead and I'm going to hit C for my crop tool, and I'm just going to pull it into if the bleed wasn't there. And don't worry, you can hit undo. Okay. All right, so now if that quarter bleed wasn't there, what would it look like? Okay, still looking pretty good. I'm feeling like maybe no, I guess I'm fine with this. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so that's just a quick like thing to check, like what it would look like if it does print edge to edge. I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo. Yeah, so get designing. Again, I've put all this stuff back up here too. Things to think about: negative space, leaving space between key elements, proximity. The elements that are close together should relate to each other. So like all of this information here, the ticket information is all together. Repetition, using similar colors, fonts and such throughout. Contrast is huge. That was one of the big things that was missing from this one, was there just wasn't enough contrast going on with all of the different, oh, I turned everything back on. Let's see. With all of the different stuff. What did I do? Well, anyways, you guys remember how bad it was looking. Let's see. Go back. Okay, there we go. Yeah, there was definitely not enough contrast going on with all of this. So yeah, contrast is huge. Can you read it? Alignment, you know, that's where all these guides come in handy. Align things to each other. Let's see. So, you know, in this case, yeah, I'm still using these guides to help align myself here. I'm pulling in, so, you know, like this text right here is just as far away from this edge as this, where this text starts up here. So having equal spacing between things, having this block of text be equal between here and here, having this being about an equal spacing from the cat and the edge. These are all things that will help pull your design together. And last but not least, oh yeah, focal points. So, you know, the big focal point was the space cat text. Then obviously, come on, oh, there we go. Then obviously the cat is huge. Now what was missing was there was a little bit of space that felt kind of empty. Let's go back to the background. And it was this right here. I mean, I'm still going back and forth on that. So I did add a little nebula here. It's not, you know, I took the opacity down, so it's not a huge focal point, but it is something that does bring our eye coming back around. And I turned it. You know, originally it wasn't coming around like this, and I turned it so it creates a little bit more of a flow, and we're pulling back in over here and creating this nice circular shape. And most importantly is take a break. Once in a while, you just got to take a break. While I was doing this, I took multiple breaks because, like I said, I know it feels overwhelming, and you just got to take a step back and let it marinate in your brain a little bit. I actually, you know, this whole idea with the cat and the rocket ship, I was having, you know, really trying to figure out what to do with this, and it came to me overnight. I'm one of those people that dreams and sleep, you know, and my brain's still working when I'm asleep. So when I woke up the next morning, I was like, oh, duh, move the cat, flip it around. The rocket will be pointing in. That's better. So yeah, don't underestimate taking a break. I know that especially with schoolwork, there's grades writing on this. And so you're probably like trying to get everything done really fast. Don't freak yourself out, okay? Just take your time, breathe, take a break once in a while. All right, guys, so in the, now at this point, before actually I continue, this is the time when you're gonna go ahead and take your screenshots. And I did change how my layers looked to make it fit better. Let me show you how to do that really fast. So if you come over here, so first off, there's always in every single panel, there's these little option areas. So if you click here, you can come down to panel options, and here I was able to decide what my thumbnail size was going to be. Before I had it really big, and it was making it hard to work because I kept having to scroll and scroll and scroll. So instead, I'm going to change it, and I changed it so I have a small thumbnail instead, and that made it a bit easier to work. Putting things in folders makes it a little bit easier also, so that when you're all done, you can just collapse them all and it feels a lot more organized. Now for your screenshot, I want to be able to see as many layers as possible. Your history panel is going to be super full and it's not going to get your whole history. So I'm more concerned with definitely being able to see these layers and seeing what's going on here. So if it might take multiple screenshots to get them all, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Okay. All right, guys. So in the next video, I'm going to show you guys how to actually, we're going to go over creating the print file, which is something that we worked on already in your textbook, but we're going to go ahead and review how to do it here too.